We have lived 5 years in Portugal and spent 30 days in Mexico. That's a lot and not a lot. Yet we have the audacity to address the title of this video. We're not experts on Mexico, but we have had so many tacos that we are automatically qualified on this matter. In terms of Portugal, we've made more than 400 YouTube videos about this magical corner of Europe. That should do it. But why are we making this video? I think mostly to answer our own confusion to what the answer really is. We love Portugal more than anything. It's an incredible place to call home, and more people are realizing this.
But why Mexico versus Portugal? What makes these countries so special? Well, if you look at the annual Global Retirement Index, Portugal and Mexico rank first and second. Portugal has it all. For us, there really aren't other serious contenders when it comes to living in Europe. Weather is decent most of the year, and cost of living can be seriously low, but you can also live the high roller life if you wish. Food is wonderful, and quality of life is simply fantastic. I think what truly makes Portugal unique is the people. They are super friendly and super chill.
Like super chill. I like to say that if they relax just one bit more, they might need to change their underwear. Even the police is chill. They're mostly concerned with what they're having for lunch, and you can't really blame them. Portugal is one of the safest countries in the world, so there isn't much for them to do anyway. Mexico, on the other hand, is not so safe. Or at least that's what we're told. According to the US State Department, you really shouldn't go there at all. Maybe it's alright to visit Cancun if you stay exclusively in the hotel zone, but that's about it. After visiting Cancun, Mazatlan, Mexico City, Puebla, San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, Oaxaca, and Playa del Carmen, we couldn't recognize any of all this fear-mongering we've been injected with since childhood. In fact, for us, Mexico felt just as safe as Europe. Sure, we did get scammed at a car rental agency, but no one was waving a gun in our faces. Yes, our experience is very anecdotal, but the idea that you most likely will be murdered on your trip to Mexico is grossly exaggerated. In 2018, 66 Americans were murdered in Mexico, but that's out of more than 36 million Americans visiting, so the actual odds of being randomly murdered are vanishingly small.
Unfortunately, the safety aspect of Mexico is the main reason why people don't even consider visiting. Luckily, most people who do visit Mexico quickly learn that it's not a dangerous country, and this is of course also why it ranks second for best place to retire. In many ways, Mexican people are a lot like the Portuguese, very friendly, helpful, and chill. There is just one caveat, and that applies to both. This chill way of life creates a lot of friction when it comes to getting things done.
Now, we haven't lived in Mexico, but in Portugal, the level of nonsensical bureaucracy is top tier. It's so bad that we pay a lawyer to take care of even the most mundane things like moving address or getting a numero utent, as we otherwise will have to spend a day or two in the waiting line at some municipal building that makes you question whether or not this thing called life is really worth it. And from what we've heard from our friends who have lived in Mexico for many years, it's even worse. But what do you really expect? It's not like this nonsense doesn't exist in the US, the UK, or even Denmark. It's a trade-off that you just have to accept, and when having these processes streamlined with the lawyer who isn't trying to rob your gringo existence, it's not really an issue.
What does seem like an issue in Mexico is finding good rental apartments. We are suckers for daydreaming about getting a place wherever we go. Even in the soulless heart of Cancun, we were browsing, but it all looked dated and overpriced. We were especially surprised how difficult it seems to find a nice apartment in Mexico City, which we, by the way, fell madly in love with. There seems to be a weirdly low supply of listings, and when we finally find a nice place in a good area, it's comically overpriced. And this is all across Mexico. Our friend who used to live there told us that they are super old school. Most apartments for rent don't even go online, so he found his by walking around the neighborhoods he liked, where ads with a phone number would then hang out of the window. And then you call to schedule a viewing without knowing if you even like the apartment in the first place. In Portugal, it's much easier, and you have both great rental apartments and houses. Admittedly, it's gotten quite expensive the last couple of years, especially if you want to live in Lisbon or Porto.
Even here in Madeira, where we live, prices have become laughable. What is also laughable is making international transfers via our bank, and you can probably relate. It's slow and expensive and basically the opposite of Paysend, who we now use for all international international transfers. Paysend has global coverage, which means you can send money fast and cheap. So let's say you need to send $100,000 to Mexico because you want the house we're about to show you. Immediately you see how many pesos the seller will get along with the $2 fee and today's rate. Usually your money arrives within minutes, and that's because transfers are instantly processed. So if we fantasize about a world where house shopping in Mexico is fast and seamless, this house is now yours. So go ahead and book your flights with Paysend Smart Card that you can also use on tacos with no extra charges.
Wow.
We got back from Brazil using our Portuguese credit card only to find out every single transaction had a 4% fee. That was an expensive lesson. With Paysend, you can send money using your bank card or simply use a mobile number. In other words, this is really the only way to send money if you prefer not giving cash away to your bank, yet want bank-level security. Paysend is available on the iOS and Android app stores, and if you use our code, the first 3 transactions are feeless. Let's get back to why prices are rising in Portugal. All this is likely a result of this recent great I now work from my laptop at home migration, where people finally realize they don't have to spend the rest of their life with eternal winters and TVs that won't shut up. We're not sure about Mexico, but in Portugal they are constantly developing new and modern homes in order to catch up with the demand. So eventually prices should come down again. Whether you're moving to Portugal or Mexico, the ideal solution is buying a home. In Portugal you can get a nice house for around $300,000, but that's of course only if you're willing to live in the more rural parts. In Porto and Lisbon, prices have been on a steady upward trend since mid-2015. We just made a video on the real estate market in Lisbon that you can find below the like button. Although the housing market in Mexico is more chaotic, it also seems like the better choice when it comes for great deals. I mean, look at this cute 2-bedroom house priced at $100,000. It's next to the beach in Oaxaca, not far from Puerto Escondido. What more can you ask for?
But then again, don't romanticize too much about Mexico. Take a screenshot of these tips if you're considering buying in Mexico. One of the reasons why we went to Mexico was to scout it out as a potential second home. We are restless people, and Mexican food in Portugal is generally a disappointment. So how great would it be to spend 4 to 5 months of the year in taco heaven? And speaking of food in Mexico, it really is as great as they say. It's easy to find great tacos, and bad ones are rarer than snowy days in Tulum. Even in the old part of Cancun, we found delicious authentic tacos, and it only got better as we went from Mazatlan to Mexico City and eventually Oaxaca as perhaps the highlight. But how about the Portuguese food?
Somehow Portuguese food is little known on an international scale, and same goes for their incredible wine that can easily compete with French and Italian. Few are familiar with just how great it is. We both gained 10 kilo after moving to Portugal, so that should say something. We've done countless food tours across every single region, and it's just consistently great, as well as quite diverse. Portuguese people are obsessed with their food, so this die-hard passion generally translates into plates of tasty deliciousness, whether it's alheira in the north or juicy clams in the south. If and when you fall in love with the Portuguese cuisine, the real magic is to be found in the north. You know, the kitchens that haven't changed for centuries. It's a special feeling to have a gastronomic experience at one of these places. There are people moving to this part of Portugal for the food alone, and that's despite weather is less ideal compared to the south. Speaking of weather, it should be noted that while Portugal has some of the best in Europe, it's not sunny and warm all year round. Summer is always wonderful, but it gets blisteringly hot the further away from the coast you get. In perhaps Portugal's most untouched region, Trás-os-Montes, the locals like to say they have 9 months of winter and 3 months of inferno.
We lived 2 years in Lisbon and were quite surprised how long the winters really are. From November it starts raining a lot and the days are quite short. It's not until May you get kind of reliable summer weather. One of the reasons we moved from Lisbon to the world's best island, Madeira, is because of these long winters. Here we have warm weather all year round and it's honestly amazing. During winter in Europe, you will only find better weather at the Canary Islands. It's a wonderful place to live and soon our dream home will be completed. You can watch this video if you are curious about that project. Whether you like it or not, you shouldn't be worried about catching a winter depression in Portugal. And the same goes for Mexico.
What makes Mexico such a unique country weather-wise is the high elevation in the central part. Mexico is 7,350 feet above sea level, which means the air is so thin it'll take your body a week to adjust, and some never truly adapt. But what's really interesting is the combination of this elevation and close proximity to equator. Whether you settle down in Mexico or San Miguel de Allende, you have nice weather all year round. We love the climate there. On the coast of fedora hats and capitalistic spirituality, it's a different story. At least if you despise boiling humidity. If we were to move to the land of tacos, we would most likely choose somewhere around Mexico City, although the pollution scares the bejesus out of us.
I mean, when it comes to pollution, some people are a lot more sensitive than others. I don't think I'm the most sensitive in the world, so the general pollution didn't bother me too much, to be honest. When I was doing photo walks in Mexico, one thing that did affect me was the altitude. And also the pollution in some way, actually, because walking around in Mexico City, because of the altitude and the pollution, you get a little dry mouth and it gets a little harder to walk, especially if you're vlogging at the same time.
We obviously can't say how it is to live in Mexico, but we were surprised just how big of an influence corporate America has on the culture. Obesity seems to be a real problem, and you have fast food chains everywhere. Not that Starbucks is the worst of them all, but we just couldn't believe the sheer amount of shops here. Of course, you still find the true Mexican culture, but there's no doubt Mexico is being Burgerkingified. Same goes for Portugal, but to a much lesser extent. Even here in Madeira, we can't avoid Pizza Hut and Burger King at prime locations that beg for, let's say, more authentic restaurants. But Portugal is still a wonderful example on the Europe most Americans dream about. You know, beautiful castles, tiny towns with cobblestone pavements and narrow roads where the average US family car would struggle to fit. Portugal is a terrific combination of old and new. You have the soul of the country, yet the convenience of modern society. Getting around without a car is fairly easy, although you should probably get one so you can truly explore all the gems it has to offer.
Especially if you're moving to Portugal on a low budget, since it's possible to be very frugal here. Keep in mind that the average income among locals is around 1,000 euros a month. That means that the lifestyle of Portuguese people is generally also very frugal. For a foreigner moving to Portugal, the cost of living can be done for $1,500 a month, but to live comfortably, you would probably need $3,000 to $4,000. But it really all depends on your lifestyle. As mentioned earlier, Portugal is also for high rollers. There's a reason Jeffy and Billy have villas in Comporta. A luxury rental apartment in Lisbon with 3 bedrooms can easily go for 4,000 euros per month. The demand for rentals in Lisbon is wild. It seems like luxury nomads are particularly fond of this city, and you can't blame them. It has everything you could ask for, and we miss having a home there immensely.
When going back to the big question whether Mexico or Portugal is the best country to live in, we still can't say for sure. Life in Portugal feels like freedom. Life in Mexico felt like freedom. There's a strange but wonderful feeling of lawlessness. It's the opposite of what we're used to in Denmark, where everything has to be organized and systemized. Where dinner at 8 o'clock means showing up at 8 o'clock and not 8:45 like in Portugal, where time and date are considered more like a mere suggestion. There is something beautiful about living in a country where it's widely accepted to show up 2 hours late for work with no repercussions. And the ironic thing about all this is that both Mexico and Portugal have excellent healthcare. In Portugal, we pay $50 per month for private healthcare. But here's the real kicker. You walk straight into the doctor's office with no waiting time, where in Denmark, going to the hospital is similar to moving address in Portugal. The Portuguese like to say nothing is urgent unless you're dying, so maybe that's why healthcare is so great here. In Mexico, it's the same deal as long as you get the private healthcare.
Even Americans who don't live in Mexico go there for treatments because they are better and cheaper. We had stem cell treatment in Mazatlan paying $2,000, which would be at least $20,000 in the US. Our American friends went to Mexico City to get a cancer treatment because their health insurance wouldn't even allow an MRI scan. She had a tumor removed successfully, and the entire experience was just on a whole other level compared to what she's used to in the US.
After 5 years in Portugal, we don't really miss anything in Denmark. Maybe it would be cool with more Scandinavian furniture shops, but that's about it. Food is better, weather is better, people are nicer, taxes are lower, life is just better. So where should Americans leaving the US move? Well, Mexico would likely be the immediate choice, since you only have to climb a wall to get there. For us, Mexico is just too far away. It wouldn't work as we visit family in Denmark 3 to 4 times a year. Perhaps the same applies if you are from the US, but if you don't like your family and Thanksgiving in US isn't the highlight of the year, maybe Portugal could work. In the end, whether you move to Mexico or Portugal, you will likely end up more happy and more fulfilled in life. That's what happened to us.